Hello everyone. So today we are going to have this very interesting panel for this very exciting topic, AI power world. Why the panel is interesting? Because we have very good mix of business experts and technology gurus. And also on the other side, we have a mix of startups and very large companies. The startup in their early stage, and the big corporate, NVIDIA, Etica, and there are a few $1 billion sitting on this table, and Fonterra, I checked the market cap, is about 8 billion recently. So we do have very good range. So during the panels, feel free to submit your question through Slido. We probably don't have time to go through a lot of questions, but probably I try to choose one or two. Maybe a quick intro here. So we have Rakesh from McLaren. Then we have Krishna from WAZE. We have Hian from Evie.ai, and we have Menon from Fonterra. I will let them to do a quick intro about themselves. Maybe from ladies first.
Hello. Can you guys hear me? Okay, there we go. Hi, I'm Megan. I'm from Fonterra, specifically our global food service business. I'm responsible for our digital portfolio.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jin. I'm the founder and CEO of Evie.ai, and we are building this AI-powered world, starting with an AI assistant that handles all your admin tasks.
Hi, I'm KK, Krishna from WAZE. WAZE is part of Google, for those who didn't know, so I realize some people still don't know. And I work on the business for APAC, driving the business, driving the product over to make it relevant for markets in the region in Asia.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Rakesh from McLaren. Right, so I think when you hear about McLaren, you probably would want to think about Formula One, right? So I'm from the applied technology part of McLaren. What we do is the good work, the technology expertise, and the research experience in the Formula One world, we kind of adopt it, adapt it, and apply it to various other verticals, right? Transport, health, motorsport, automotive, being some of those. Right, so I serve as a chief engineer at Applied Technologies, largely providing oversight to the technical teams and projects.
My name is Genping. I'm a partner at the Vertex Venture, which is early stage VC investment firm under Temasek Holdings. So actually here we have a very interesting company with it's Vertex Israel team invested more than 10 years ago. And we exited to Google about 2 or 3 years ago, created about maybe near 50 times return in about 10 years. So that's what we do. So come back to the panel, because at the VC, we hear a lot of startups pitching to us with the keywords AI. I think sometimes I feel it's overused, but sometimes it makes a lot of sense. In the end, I think different people have different understanding about this AI, especially this word AI, especially given the business they are in. So to start this panel, I would ask our guests to define their understanding within their business. Maybe can use some stories or case studies from their business.
All right. Okay, so I will borrow the use of AI from other parts of the business. One key area which AI is very obvious, I guess, is around supply chain. So we have a fleet of 546 currently, I think, and we service 10,300 farmers a day. So we have to collect roughly 86 million liters of milk on a daily basis out of New Zealand. So you can imagine that the optimization and the routing of those pickups, depending on the amount of offer that there is available, the amount of milk that's coming from one farm versus another farm, how many times they actually milk their cows per day. That's actually quite a real example of AI in place for us as we optimize pickup and delivery to our factories.
Okay, so I usually like to start with what AI is not, at least today, which is Terminator or Her in the movie, Scarlett Johansson in the movie Her, right? It's not something that's sentient, it's not alive, it doesn't direct itself or come up with its own agenda. But I think what, for me, defines AI is very much the autonomy, in the sense of an autonomous car that drives itself. You're able to give it very high-level directions and say, I want to go from point A to point B, and it figures out how the best way to do that, looks at weather, looks at traffic, it understands this. And similarly for us as an AI assistant, you just have to say, Evie, schedule a meeting for us next week, and that's it, you're done, right? There's no kind of, you hand off some level of agency to it, and the ability to see and hear, interact, and with the world. I think that's really what AI means, and it's really powerful. And it's slightly different a little bit from data and big data, where you have a lot of data, you're looking for patterns, optimization, and it's kind of related, but I think it's worth kind of making that distinction.
Yeah, very interesting. Thanks for setting the context on what AI is not. It is very critical today. I'll speak on behalf of WAZE and Google, and a lot of things that have happened, that are happening right now, are touching our lives, whether we know it or not. Let's start with WAZE. An example of what WAZE does is for drivers to know what the speed limits are. And the speed limits cannot be humanly mapped across the world. We're talking about 30 million, 40 million different segments, and we try to use different kinds of techniques. AI might be a little far-fetched. Machine learning is where it starts off to try and get to to the most accurate speed limits on the road. So that's one application on WAZE, on the WAZE app, that is essentially AI ML. And on the Google side of things, we've spoken about Waymo. You must have heard about it. Waymo, which is into autonomous driving. That's one attempt at AI. There's the others that are, if you've caught up with Google I/O that happened a couple of weeks back, it was similar to what we spoke about in terms of setting appointments, a machine setting appointments for you as an assistant. Setting appointments in real life with your salon or your restaurant. These are all examples of AI touching our lives. And again, it's practical, very useful applications that ease our lives. That's what AI is getting into.
Right. So my take on it is, basically it's a set of algorithms, technologies coming together, by and large with the so-called underlying help by way of decision making, right? So if I were to draw an example into the Formula One world of sorts, right? If you look at a race car, there are probably about 300 to 400 sensors, right, within each of these cars. And each of this sensor is actually beaming information while a race is taking place at easily something like 50 to 100 hertz, right? So now that's about 100 data points within a second from one sensor, times by so-called 300 sensors, multiplied by 60 laps. That's a lot of information. Right now, making use of this information to guide decision making during the race is one form of AI of sorts, right? In a loose sense, things like when exactly should I pit, right? Because if I pit at the wrong so-called lap, what happens is I could just end up losing the race, right? So how do you make these decisions almost on a fly of sorts? Right, by making use of all this information, right, is one form of AI that we kind of look at in our world of sorts.
Just one potential interesting build, right, on what's being described, is that what we've heard is it's helping us make decisions. It's actually not creating or coming up with answers for questions that have yet to be solved. And I think that's one massive misunderstanding of AI, at least within my organization and with the people I talk to is that AI will solve it for us. That's actually not what AI does, and I think that's definitely one of the demystifying things that we have to actually get out there.
Yep, exactly. I guess AI still is at its early days, especially given our limited digital infrastructure we have nowadays. So I think just now the discussion, our panelists kind of shared like what are they using AI to trying to achieve now. But maybe another perspective is like if AI continue to develop very fast in the next few years, so what's your imagination for 10 years later in your business that AI will achieve? Like your basically that's a vision that we can set for the, let's say, in 10 years time frame. Anyone want to comment?
Rightly put is that we are in very early stages. Yes, we are. I think there's a tremendous amount of potential, and what companies like ours are doing is trying to make it democratize it, so that there could be more players in the ecosystem. TensorFlow is a language we've open sourced. We've opened up an AI center in China, and I think the technology has a long runway. We're still very far off from really realizing the potential. And again, it's not Terminator. It is, think of it as 20 years back when an automated washing machine was on the market. People thought that this is going to destroy jobs, change lives, etc. for the worse. But that's not the way it is. I think things are progressing. I think there's a lot of players right here in this forum. I see a lot of players trying to dabble their hands with the technology, and the runway is massive.
Yeah, I think that's great. It's like the automated washing machine. The other way to think about AI really at this point in time is it's another screwdriver or another hammer. It's another tool that amplifies human ability and your ability to get your job done. So, I think in terms of, and there's that kind of brings a little bit, there's an interesting question here, which we'll probably get to, but it also kind of segs into the question of the future of ethics, right? What are the ethics of using a screwdriver or a hammer? I think, any lawyers in the room? No? Okay. I think the real question is liability, which is if the self-driving car that you're in, that you own, does something wrong, who pays the bill, really? I think it's much more about the liability than is the ethics. I mean, if a government has an autonomous drone that fires a missile, the government is still ultimately responsible for it, right? They're responsible for making the algorithms decide in a certain way. So that's my quick kind of thought, and I hope you don't mind I'm blending these questions with the discussion points.
I'm going to do the same. But I think on that question of liability, I think the current comfort is that you can actually point to someone right now and say that an individual made that decision. An individual got us to X point, right? And you can actually trace that thinking. Unfortunately, right, when you start looking at some of these neural networks that are being developed, that are so vast and so diverse and they are self-learning, it's less easy to pinpoint where all of that went wrong. Now, as we all know, the underlying data set of which AI is running across is actually the most important feed or input into the engine, which in itself already has bias and has a lot of challenges in itself. So I think that's where it starts getting quite unwieldy. I'm not sure necessarily if we answered or went where you wanted us to go.
Yeah, about that. You want to comment?
Yeah, maybe just a little bit of add-on of sorts, more from an aspirational and inspirational perspective, right? So largely, if I look at maybe some applications in 10 years' time that can answer some of today's problem. For example, how do we kind of the nurture young, right, and understanding what talent that they have, right, in a so-called predictive manner, right? So we kind of put sensors onto cars, right? But if we now are able to sense up our young, correct, by way of some sensors like an EEG by just wearing a cap of sorts, right? Getting your heart signals from here, having so-called motor skill kind of proxies by having accelerometers, right? So from there, you can actually get quite a bit of information, right, about, say, your young of sorts. And then if you start collecting this information and then picking out some signals that could be indicative of the fact that, hey, this guy might be good at swimming or athletics or some other sport of sorts, right? So the amount of money that we spend as parents today in trying to figure out what our child is good at is tremendous, right? However, if you kind of make use of some of these component technologies, right, to guide some of these decisions that we would need to make as parents, or some of us, right, those could be things that we can aspire for.
I would have appreciated my parents not sending me to the piano classes at all, so I agree.
I wouldn't want to go either. Okay, just curious, for the first question, maybe I twist a little bit. For me, I didn't see that's a challenge to accept AI. I thought that's something for sure will just come, people will accept, like a mobile phone, right? Do you think there's any challenge related to cultural acceptance so far from your network?
I think it depends. For me, the nuance in that question is probably in some outworkings of AI rather than necessarily in the way AI is already embedded in our day-to-day. So I don't think anyone would doubt that they would pull out WAZE and they would say that I'm a bit nervous around whether I can accept this culturally. I think that's not necessarily where we're headed to with that question, but more around potentially how do we interact with AI? What level of autonomy do we necessarily give it? How much space do we give it in our day-to-day roles? I'm not sure whether you guys feel the same way.
Yeah, so if I may just chip in a little bit of sorts, right? I see that I can draw some parallels in, say, the banking world where I used to be from, right? So when you had online banking at first, right, people are a bit apprehensive as to basically transact using the phone, right? You're just not sure whether it's secure or otherwise. But then with time, slowly, and possibly because of the fact that you are a lot more acclimatized, right, and you see other people doing it and everything seems to be fine, you kind of give the go ahead and say that, hey, I want to start using it of sorts, right? Because there is some value exchange that is taking place. I'm seeing some benefit out of it, right? And I am not really overly troubled, and therefore I can accept it. However, if there comes a point, right, when maybe jobs start getting displaced, correct? And when that happens, now people would then start feeling the pinch, and there's an impact and implication to me on a personal level. And that's when, you know, there would probably be that so-called concern around acceptance, I suspect.
Yeah, I think I can share a little bit from what we see. So we provide essentially two companies, probably their first ever AI employee. Right? It's structured as a person. It's got an email address. You can write to it. You can ask it to do things for you. We see a very interesting adoption curve. In retrospect, probably not surprising. It's very classic. You always have early adopters, 10%, 15%, very comfortable new technology. A lot of times what we find, the initial marker, and this goes a bit to education and the future of jobs, is whether you've had an assistant before. And if you've had an assistant before, you know how to work with an assistant. You know how to derive value from an assistant, and you're very comfortable letting go of some parts of your control. So that's easy. That's great for us. But then you have the 80 to 90% of people who never worked with an assistant before, who now need to transition their mindset from doing work to managing. So you can almost see in the future that the future of jobs is about creativity, about people, about networking, about directing and giving direction. And you have a whole manner of AI employees, AI tools that actually get the stuff done for you, right? That take your ideas of what you want to do and go try it out. and take a lot of the mechanical stuff away from you. So I think that's going to be a huge shift, right? And that's something that in the long run, I think it's a good thing for us as people. You know, it's by nature we're social creatures, and we're not cogs in a machine by nature, right? That's why you have so many strict processes that came up in the Industrial Revolution to kind of force people into these machine-like roles. You know what? We're getting to the point where the machines can actually do that, and we can go back to being people, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree with some points here. I think the value proposition to the user will start debunking cultural acceptances. If my dad used to write checks till 4 years back, he's now moved to online banking. He can transfer today because he's realized now that it is easier, it is more convenient, it takes less effort to get things done, and I think that's what will drive adoption. That's what will drive further creativity in the area.
Okay. So maybe before we go to the next audience question, for Krishna and Rakesh, maybe share a bit more like from tech perspective. What are you like most excited about the AI technology development in the next 5 to 10 years? Maybe we can discuss a little bit of tech jargon here. People probably shall know like something interesting or something very disruptive. One example is I learned some term called no free lunch theory. I guess like many people didn't know that it's really a theory that they are about AI, that you can there's no one solution to the whole AI world. Probably for each specific context or situation, you need to have like a specific AI framework. But from the tech side, like what do you get? What are you most excited about the next 10 years?
I can go first. I mean, I'll speak on behalf of WAZE. What started off when we founded the product and when the founders took this product to market was to save a driver 5 minutes of his time or her time on every drive. It seemed like an easy thing to do, and then there was a lot of technology, there was a lot of elements that went into the product. And now with the further development in technology and the available resources right now, that ambition has become eliminate traffic altogether. Now that looks huge to acquire, but I think that is the excitement. I mean, set very high goals and go towards them tenaciously to be able to solve for it. Like I spoke about a few minutes back about the road speed limits. I think there was a lot of random forest techniques applied there to see how we can achieve that. And now with WAZE trying to get the traffic scene completely sorted out, and then imagine the future where it could probably get into Waymo, into autonomous cars, and that could be something that that's something that's really exciting to see come to life, right? We're still maybe not 5 years, maybe a little more, but something to go for. Lofty goals, try to get there. Even if you get 80% down the line, we've succeeded tremendously.
So for me, what excites me is how AI kind of percolates down into my everyday work life of sorts. Right, so that excites me because what would happen is I would need to kind of coexist with what you call a virtual work buddy, right? So today I kind of clock anywhere between 8 to 10 hours at work, right? So tomorrow I come in and for example I might require a competitor analysis report that needs to be generated, right? I could spend anywhere like 5 hours coming up with something. Right, but what do I do tomorrow? I basically talk to my so-called virtual buddy and tell him that, hey, do this for me. And what he will do is he will basically start to web crawl, right? Make use of some natural language processing so-called technologies, right? Which will allow so-called information extraction. And these technologies, by the way, do exist, right? And then he does a summarization of that, right? He makes use of some .NET technologies, right, comes up with a PowerPoint almost automatically, right? And therein, I've got a report. So I used to work 10 hours. Today, I'm just going to work 5 hours, right? Productivity is 120%, right? So the productivity improvement, which hopefully translates to revenue, I'll keep my pay, right? I'll give whatever his maintenance cost is. I get 3 hours back. I'll probably play golf on a school field or something like that. It's cheaper that way.
Well, I'm not sure like whether technology will ever bring us there. But one thing I
will.
For sure is like people are going to work more and more, right?
Yeah, I'm pegged as a starter guy, and I'm an engineer by training, right? So definitely, first of all, you can get started today. Sign up for Evie. You'll start with your scheduling, and then we'll go from there. But
yeah, download Evie and try out.
Exactly our vision, right? I mean, in all seriousness, that's exactly what it is. It's this workplace sidekick that gets more and more of your stuff done for you so you can get more done. But I think coming back to your question around technologies and what's exciting, I think AI today is still very vertical, very heavily engineered for a specific task. Trust me, trying to build something just to schedule a complex meeting across time zones and all that it's not easy. It's not at all like you have this neural network and you self-learns how to do this, right? And to your point, Megan, it's not a self-learning thing. It's very much very specific capabilities that AI is delivering. And today we're at the point where it can hear you, it can understand you reasonably enough through speech. We're getting much better at vision. So so computers now can see, they can hear. They still don't know how to reason, and they don't know how to reason with common sense. And I think I'm very excited about today, what's in very experimental phases is neural networks that also incorporate memory, and they look like neural Turing machines. And those are really quite interesting. I think those hold a lot of promise for how AI can get a lot smarter, I think.
Yeah. So I guess a common theme is that AI is going to be developing very fast, and either it's very scary or it's very accepted, right? And hope that it all gets to work less, which I don't think so. But that naturally to the next question, actually probably the two. So do you think like currently there's enough governance framework for AI application giving all these like accelerated speed of innovations, and which probably will cause potential ethic issues in the AI post-world?
I'll say, I think governance and frameworks, typically when it comes to technology, is always lagging, right? But I think that's the natural state of things. Things are still developing. You don't want to regulate too early before you know what it is that you're regulating and before you kill stuff that doesn't quite exist or that would have existed. So I think for me, right now it's still moving at the right pace.
I think we have to give credit to governing bodies for trying their best to be able to catch up with technology. Technology is accelerating at a really fast pace, and governance is supposed to apply for all. And the case in point is that less than 5% of technology succeeds. So what do you actually frame your governance for, and when do you step in? So I think we need to give a lot of credit to governing bodies for having caught up all this while. There will be a lag. I think we need to live with that and make sure that that rapid response is there as it always is.
Yeah, I would kind of agree with the both of you, largely because I think a lot of data governance framework is now put in place at this point in time as we speak, right? So you hear about the GDPRs coming into effect not too long ago, right? So that's a first step, right? AI is a lot more than just data, right? It's kind of bringing them together, see what the real life application is and the potential impact around it, right? So I guess from what I see around us is basically a wait, see. understand and appreciate the effects attitude, so much so that once you have enough grounding and understanding, that would probably be the point in time when you can actually start about thinking about governance. I mean, the thought has started, but putting anything proper in place, I guess that would take time of sorts.
Okay, thank you. Maybe one question for Jing. As an AI startup, do you have any advice for other startups in this region who are trying to do AI or just startup?
Actually, I mean, I think this is, if you're thinking about AI, whether it's a startup or in any kind of adopting AI in any organization, I think what's really important is just to think about what is the problem you're solving. The tools are tools. It's a screwdriver, it's a hammer. What are you building with it, and who's going to pay you for it, or what? You know, are you saving money? Are you making money? And I think that would be. It's really not about AI. It's not about startup. It's just business, and it's about solving problems. And on that note, I mean, there's a potential AI winter question I'll just address real quickly. You know, the first AI winter, so to speak, was in the 70s and 80s, where it was all academia and funding, and that just dried up. I think today's AI is very much applied and very much funded by real-world applications, real-world value. So, no, I mean, there's hype, certainly, and I think all of us here are very consistently trying to de-hype a little bit, but at the ground level, it's very clear that AI and big data and analytics is delivering clear value, and it's funded by that. Yep.
Okay, great. So we have, here we come to the last question. This is a Doomsday Prediction. One sentence to answer. Are you along with Elon Musk or Eric Schmidt? Will human race still be relevant in another 100 years, given the speed of AI innovation?
I would say we would still be here. No, well, I actually don't think we will be here, but not because of AI, but because of the way that we're treating the world as a whole.
Right, so definitely on the side of Eric Schmidt on this one. Yeah.
I don't know.
Because I know how difficult it is to build something basic.
I think we'll be a more evolved species. That's my view, very positive. Maybe we'd be settled in Mars by then, I don't know, but we'll be more evolved.
Right, so I think we'll probably be somewhere in between. I'm not citing either
Smart
one
answer.
of thought, right? What I believe is we would potentially be domesticated by technology, right? And let me just explain a little, right? For example, when there was the agricultural revolution, prior to that, we were actually free-roaming spirits, right? And then when cultivation came, it actually domesticated us to kind of live around that cultivation, right? And then you have the handphone. Now we live our lives around, correct, the handphone, right? We are not necessarily enslaved, but we are domesticated to a certain extent, right? So with AI, I think there would be that twin relationship that would be taking place, but we just need to be a bit careful about that.
So we are really talking about a matrix scenario here. Okay, thanks everyone. Thanks our panelists for the great sharing.